All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to our Canvas training for today. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera on. Today's topic is, well, the title is kind of funny because I think on the agenda it's assignments, grading, and feedback. On the presentation here, it's assignments and grading. We're going to cover quite a bit of stuff today. We're going to be talking mostly about grading and feedback. However, we can't do that in Canvas without talking a little bit about assignments. And so we're also going to be working in some assignments as we talk about getting started. So I would like to go ahead and just introduce myself. Thank you all for joining me. I am Matt Miller, and I'm a learning specialist here at Instructure. 30 years I spent in the distance learning field here in the state of Texas, dating all the way back to the early 1990s at McLennan Community College in Waco, and then moving over to Navarro in the year 2000, August of 2000, I remember. Moved over to Navarro College, which is a public 2-year school located just below Dallas Fort Worth, the area. And I spent the next 21 years there in many capacities, always dealing with distance learning, professional development, as well as anything instructional technology related. I was the Dean of Online Instruction as well for about a decade in that role. So anyway, I retired in December of 21, and we was happily retired for about 3 months. And then my wife said, "You got to go back to work." So I got to listen to what my wife says. Been married to her for 32 years, so I better listen to her. At any rate, so I was lucky enough to get a job here at Instructure to kind of do what I really like doing really well, and that's working with faculty and staff from all over the country, as well as playing around in Canvas all day. So I've been a Canvas user since 2017. Like you, I'm a recovering Blackboard user. So some of the things that we're going to talk about, I hope you're going to find, if you haven't discovered them already, just how easy grading and things like that can be in Canvas, including setting up your grade book to make sure it's calculating correctly. You're going to find that Canvas works so much better, takes a lot of the guesswork out of it that I think that Blackboard may have had. Not knocking Blackboard in any stretch, but just know that I fell in love with Canvas a long time ago and didn't look back. And so I'm definitely in the Canvas camp now because they pay me to be so as well. But here I also want to invite you to please log into your MySU, MyWSU Tech portal. To get to your Canvas instance, you can just go to my.wsutech.edu. You also have a direct link to Canvas by just going to wsutech.instructure.com. As per usual, I would love for you to play along with us today. We'll have some opportunities for you to put your hands on a keyboard and kind of play along with some of the things that we'll be walking you through today with regard to assignments, grading, and feedback. It is not mandatory that you do put your hands on there, but you can if you want to. Okay, so I just want to leave it up to you as far as what you prefer doing in terms of just sitting back and absorbing or participating with hands on. So, our agenda for today is going to be a little walk through the assignments menu in Canvas. We call it the assignments index page, but it's basically that assignments menu that you have whenever you log into your Canvas course. You'll see assignments on the left-hand side. I want to spend just a moment talking about assignment groups. In Blackboard, we called them categories. So as you categorize your assignments by various things, some of you may weigh your grades. Some of you may be taking a totality of points that students may earn for their grade. We're going to show you how you can kind of work with both inside of Canvas. I am going to spend a moment talking about weighted grades. Some of you may weight your grades, as I mentioned. Then I'm going to show you a neat little trick of how you can bulk update your assignment due dates. And then after that, we're going to dive into the speed grader. We're going to actually build an assignment together. And I'm going to show you kind of how the speed grader works. One little hint on the speed grader, and one thing I do like to mention for you as well, is that Canvas does have a student app that you can get in the Apple Store or Google Play. It also has a teacher app that you can also download as well. The cool thing is that the speed grader does work with the app. And so if you are standing in line at Kroger or wherever you shop, and I don't know what your grocery store chains look like up there, chances are you have a Kroger's maybe or a Publix or something. But anyway, you could be standing in line with your iPad actually grading papers. I mean, that's probably a far-fetched scenario, but you could be doing that if you wanted to, because the app does support the grading aspects of the speed grader as well, which is kind of cool. And then we're going to go into the grade book and show you some neat features about the grade book that I think are a little bit unique to Canvas, some different options that you have. I would say that however you grade your students and whatever type of grade you have, make sure that it's reflected on your course policies and syllabus. There's nothing worse than telling your students how you're going to grade them and then in Canvas set it up a different way. So always make sure this is coming from an old dean who hated grade challenges more than anything in the world. So at any rate, you know how it goes. You got to just make sure that everything corresponds with each other as you go through it. So let's log into our Canvas account and let's take a look at the assignment index. So I'm going to flip over here to my Canvas instance. Now, I'm not going to work in the WSU account today. I'm going to work in my own course over here because I have some things set up in there that I want to show you. It looks exactly like yours. So don't despair if it looks a little bit different. There may be some tools that I have that you don't or vice versa. But I want to just kind of walk you through your assignments index. So I'm just going to go into a course today, and you can choose whatever sandbox course you have to go into. And eventually it'll get there. It has to think for a minute, apparently. There we go. And so whenever you're in your course, put my menu up, sorry, there we go. I want you to find your assignments menu over here on the left-hand side. So find assignments, and this will take you into your assignments menu. Now, I've got a bunch of example assignments and things like that in here, which is one of the reasons I wanted to use my instance today. And one of the things when you go to your assignments menu for the first time, particularly if you've pulled over things from Blackboard, is when you go to your assignments, you might be thinking, assignments is where I go to create assignments that students can submit to me through Canvas. And you would be correct. However, in Canvas, there is a dual meaning to assignments. One of them is exactly that. It is a tool that you can use to create assignments for your students, much like you did in Blackboard. However, Canvas assignments has a different definition, and it pertains strictly to the grading and the grade book. And that is that anything that you can attain a grade for, which we're talking about 3 things in Canvas, which is an assignment, a quiz, or a graded discussion. So assignments, quizzes, and graded discussion, those are the things that you can receive a grade for as a student in Canvas. And as you look carefully at your assignments menu, you're going to see discussions. You're going to see quizzes. Remember those rocket ships we talked about last on Friday? And you're going to see this pen and paper icon, which are assignments, writing assignments and so on. Essentially, folks, anything that you can receive a grade for is going to show up in your assignments menu. And if it is published, each of these items correspond to a gradebook column. So if it's in your assignments menu, and it is published, which means it's visible to students and available to students to take, then it is going to also be a grade in your gradebook column. So let's introduce ourselves, getting started, this discussion's here. If I go to my gradebook column, you're going to see that these items exist as gradebook columns. Okay? Oh, okay. Probably Tia asked if I'm looking at there's no assignments in your gradebook or whatever, or there's no assignments in your Canvas account. Is it still waiting for a transfer? I don't know if it's waiting for the transfer, but you may not have some assignments. Is there a Christy is, by the way, I didn't say thank you to Christy. Christy, thank you so much for being here and setting up all this. Big shout out to her. Christy, go ahead. You were going to say something.
I might be able to bail you out here, Matt. So If they have already received their main courses that were go live in summer and fall, the content has not been pushed into those courses yet.
Okay.
So they may be able to see courses, but there is nothing. That doesn't mean there won't be. So
Okay.
they're not supposed to do anything in those live courses until after the content has been pushed out to them. We're using the Blueprint Association process, but
Oh, okay. Okay.
they should have a sandbox that they can play in. And so if they don't have one of those, chat with me if you don't have a sandbox.
Yeah, if you don't have a sandbox, just jump in there and you can private chat with Christy, and she can get you set up with the sandbox course. Here's the cool thing though. I'm going to show you though in just a moment. You can actually set up how your course will be graded even before you have anything in it. Okay, then we're going to show you how to do that here in just a moment, and you will have some hands-on stuff as well. So if you don't have any assignments in there, don't fret. Just watch mine, and you can see how it works. So yes, so that is the definition of assignments as being part of the grade book. So if it is in the assignments menu and it is published, then it has a corresponding column here. So Canvas basically pulls everything into the assignments menu. Now, that is not to say that if I go over here to discussions and you see there's that let's introduce ourselves and the Unit 1 class discussion and so on, if I go to my discussions menu, which is somewhere over here, there it is, then you will find those discussions here. They introduce ourselves and all the discussion topics and so on. I even have a ton more in here that aren't published or aren't for grades that I have in here, but you will see them there. You'll also see, if we look back at our assignments menu, any of these quizzes here, these quizzes have a little rocket ship here beside it. You'll see those. If you go to your quizzes menu, then you'll see those quiz menu items there. So, and a lot of times you will see that the quizzes menu, the discussions and assignments menu are hidden from view because you can place all of those items in a module, okay? And then that allows the student to take whatever you want. I kind of, in a way, and it may not be the best definition or correlation to Blackboard, but if you think about your discussions and quizzes and assignments, menus as actually almost being like in your control panel where you go to create things. This is where things are created, but generally not shown to the students. There's all those quizzes that we have here that are in the quizzes menu, but they're all in the assignments menu. And why is that? Because assignments is actually where you stage your grade book for weighing purposes and for creating rules like dropping the lowest grade and doing things like that. It's all handled here in the assignments menu. In Blackboard, remember, you went into your grade book in Blackboard, and you did a 3-step process that I like to call build it, size it, and stuff it. Okay. And that build it, size it, and stuff it was you went out and you created categories for those of you who weigh your grades. You build those categories for the different types of items that you grade upon. Then you size it by assigning percentages to those particular items, right? And then you make sure that every gradebook item you have belongs to one of those categories. Is that correct? In Canvas, it's kind of the same way, but you're going to love how easier it is, I think, than anything else. Also in Blackboard, you couldn't exceed 100%. You can in Canvas, and we'll talk about why you would want to do that in just a moment. So you'll see if you look carefully at our assignments menu here, first of all, I want you to notice that I have them all kind of grouped together in this group called assignments. That's not unusual. But I want you to see that I've got here, as far as what the types of assignments that I have here is, I've got a discussion and a little assignment here that are kind of like low stake, getting started type assignments. You'll also see that I've got some unit discussions here, and I only have 3, so this is just an example, okay? I probably would have more if I was actually teaching a class. Same thing with the quizzes. You can see I've got different quizzes that that corresponds to various lessons in my class. You'll also see that I've got 3 unit writing assignments, or 4 unit writing assignments, excuse me. I've got some major exams like a midterm and a final. I've got a research project. I even have extra credit here. So what I can do is I can actually group these by what they are. Now, let me just ask a quick question of you. How many of you weigh your grades? Whether you're using a total number of points or weighing, you might still want to group your assignments. Okay. So to group your assignments, again, this is kind of what we would say categories in Blackboard. We call them groups in Canvas. And you'll notice that in your assignments menu, not in your grade book, this is where you create your groups. So if, for example, I had some little kind of getting started assignments here, I could create a group just by clicking the plus group button. And I could call this, getting started. Maybe if I spelled it correctly or whatever. Okay. And I can hit save. Now, when I do that, it's going to create a group called Getting Started. Now, here's the great thing. If you already know kind of what groups you have and you have no assignments in this course yet, you could go ahead and create them now. Okay. The next group that I have is called maybe the discussions group. Okay. So I've got some discussions here and I could have 10 of those, 16 of those, or whatever, however many I have. But I'm going to create another group. And by the way, whatever you have in your syllabus is probably the terminology you'll want to use. Call this one my discussions. I have another bunch just called quizzes, and they're all kind of like minor quizzes. So maybe I'll just call that group minor quizzes. And hit save. And you'll see that I'm getting these groups together here. The next one I have are some writing assignments. So I'm going to group those together. Okay. I have some major exams. I could separate these and have a midterm that's weighed differently or whatever than final. Either way, but I have some major exams here. So I'm going to just call these major exams. And then finally, I've got a research project. I may lump that in with my major exams just for today. But also I have an extra credit type assignment. So now that I've got all of my groups here, I need to make sure that all of these are associated with whatever groups they have. Now, the easiest way to do that, if you have a lot of things, is simply just to click over here on the left-hand side. You'll notice that you have these 8 little dots there. Oops, just lost it all. If I click and hold it down and just drag it, boom, 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 all the way down here, you'll notice that I can drag these assignments into their respective categories. Now, what I might do is I might move this up here so I can get to it a little easier. And I'm going to drag these 3 items into the major exam group. Okay. On my getting started assignments, I'll drag that up to the top. Notice how I can kind of move it around. And the only reason I'm doing that is just to make it a little easier for me to grab them and put them in there. On my discussions, maybe I'll drag it to the top as well, just underneath getting started. There we go. And I can drag these items into that group there. So notice how I'm just reorganizing all the assignments in my course. The reason I'm doing this way is when you move your things over from Blackboard, you might get just a big pile of assignments. It may be grouped for you as you categorize them in Blackboard, which is great. But if it doesn't, then you know now how to create a group and drag your items into that group. As you create a quiz or a discussion or an assignment in Canvas, it will ask you what group you want to associate it with. And so you don't have to group it if you're not grouping it. If you're just going to have a point value or whatever, you don't have to. But even if I'm awarding cumulative points, I might actually still group my assignments just so I can do a little rule that I'm going to show you here in just a moment. So next I've got these minor quizzes here. I'm going to go ahead and move this up here so I can get to these a little easier. Oops. Minor quizzes. There we go. And I'm just going to drag these guys into place here. You can see I've got a classic quiz and a new quiz for those of you who are in my training on Friday, you can see the difference automatically just by based on whether it's an outline of a rocket ship or a new one. I have these writing assignments, which I could rename. I mean, I could always go over here and just rename this one writing assignments by editing it, or I could just go through the process and just create a area here. What I might do is, yeah, I'll do this as well. I'm going to drag all these into there. Now I'm going to have an empty group here called assignments, which I could now delete if I want to and just get rid of it. I could also create a group though, or just rename this group non-graded items or whatever. I could just have a little group called non-graded items, and maybe these are items that aren't going to be calculated into the final grade. Okay. Now, once you have your groups built and their associations, all of these items are associated with the correct group, now that sets the stage for you to weigh your categories. But I want to give you a moment first to go out to your assignments menu. And if you would like to, maybe you have your syllabus out in front of you, or maybe you kind of know how you weigh your students. Make sure that you have groups created for the items that you grade in Canvas. Now that you have your groups and you've got your assignments associated with them, but even if you don't, if you have your groups already there, what can I do with these? Well, if I weigh my grades, I can now choose to weigh them. If I don't weigh my grades, fine. I don't have to, but I do have my assignments grouped, which might be important as well. Christy, if you don't mind fixing Tia up with one, that would be great. Thank you, ma'am. Teamwork makes the dream work. Okay. So if I'm ready to actually weigh these grades now, you're going to love this because it's going to take all the guesswork and mathematics out of your grade book for you. It's just going to do it for you. So let's just say here that I've graded everything is worth 100 points. But even if it isn't, maybe I've got some items in here that aren't worth 100 points or whatever. But I know that these items here, like these getting started assignments, aren't going to compare grade-wise with my major exams, all right? So if you're using cumulative points, if you're using a point valuation in your courses, you kind of technically are probably weighing also in a sense because certain things are worth more points than other things. Weighing is no different except for you kind of grade everything on a 100% scale, but then you group your assignments by what they are, and then you assign the weight or the percentage that it's worth based on by their category or by their group. So when I'm ready to weigh these grades, if I go up to the upper right-hand side of the page, you're going to see these 3 dots here. And I'm going to choose that 3 dots, and I'm going to choose assignment groups weight. So you're going to see an assignment group weight link when you click on the 3 dots. You're going to have a little checkbox here that says you want to weight final grades based on assignment groups. So to do this, I'm going to click there. And then notice every category I have. You can ignore this. I only use that for demo purposes, for templates and so on. But all of those groups that we just created are right here. Okay? All I have to do is plug in their percentage value. So let's just say, for fun, my getting started assignments, let's say they're going to be really low stakes. Maybe they're worth only 5% of the overall grade, even though I'm grading everything on 100. But because I'm going to assign them 5% at the end of the day, Canvas is only going to count those assignments as a total accumulation of 5% the student can earn in this course. Okay? Let's say my discussions, let's say they're worth 15% of my total, of the total overall grade. So a little higher stakes, but again, not the end of the world if they don't do them all. Okay? My minor quizzes, let's just say they're 20%. And now notice that it's going to put a little running total at the bottom here. Okay. So notice that, again, there's 20% of the grade. Let's say my writing assignments here are also 20%. Okay. Actually, let's go ahead and make it 25%. There we go. Why not? And now you can see I'm at 65%. Let's say my major exams are worth 35% of the overall grade. Just a few exams, but man, I tell you, they're going to be worth a lot compared to the rest of these items here. And I'm just making these numbers up off the top of my head. Okay. You know how you weigh your grades on your syllabus, right? At the end of the day, it has to equal 100%, right? Now, remember in Blackboard, if you went over 100%, remember that little error message you would get and said, nope, can't do that. You gotta only make it 100%. In Canvas, however, notice that if you have extra credit, now there's a few ways to apply extra credit in Canvas. This is how you can kind of formalize it by weighing. So if you have anything, any kind of assignments or things like that you want to designate as extra credit, if they do the assignments, then they can earn extra credit. Then you could put those items in that extra credit group and you can give it a value, say 5% or whatever. So maybe they can earn up to 5 additional percentage points in this class. Now notice that it jumped this up to 105 and it didn't give me an error. Okay. So you can exceed 100 points. Now this is important because if the student chooses not to do any of the extra credit work, they're not going to be penalized. Why? Because 100% of what they're being graded on is wrapped up in these categories here. However, if they decide to do the extra credit, they have the potential, not the guarantee, to earn up to 5 percentage points extra in addition to what the 100 points that they're being graded on. Okay? By that same token, if I have items, practice items or whatever, that I do not want graded, maybe practice quizzes or things like that, maybe drafts or assignments or whatever that aren't going to receive a grade, I could create that non-graded items area and put those items in the non-graded items that are going to be worth 0% of the overall grade. So if I'm weighing my grades, that's how you can create extra credit opportunities, by allowing a percentage of the grade to be an extra credit assignment. The other way you can allow extra credit is if a student completes a test and they do the extra credit work, you can simply go in, if they made 100 on the test, you can give them 105. Or you can actually, in the grade book, override the final grade to give them extra points if you do it that way. Okay? So there's 2 ways you can apply extra credit. One is to just throw some extra points onto the end of an assignment that you've graded for them, or you can, if you're weighing grades, I find this to be a pretty way to kind of finesse extra credit is to create an extra credit group and give it a percentage and then drop in whatever assignment needs to be as part of that. So notice that when you do that, it's going to give you the percentages here in your assignment group. So you're going to see what percentage each of these are. You are also in the grade book, you're actually going to have some columns which you can hide, but you're going to have some columns here. You can, Christy asks, for those of you who don't use the weighted grades, you can create a single assignment for extra credit if you want to in the grade book and just award extra points. Or if they're on an assignment that they do and there's extra credit as part of the assignment, again, you could go into that assignment. Let's just say, this assignment right here, this writing assignment, let's say for extra credit, they did it, they only made an 85, but they earned the extra credit, it might jump them up to a 90. I could easily just override a score just like that and give them extra credit for that. I could even exceed 100, as you see this example here. So this person made 100, I gave them 110 or whatever. So you can exceed the grade if you want to for that as well. You can hide those columns as well. We'll talk about that when we come back to the grade book. But that is just a nice way of weighing your grades. One other thing that you can do in the assignments menu that I think that you'll like, and that is, even if you're not awarding point or value, if you're not weighing your grades, by grouping your assignments, you can also create a rule. in your courses. So let's just say, for example, and you can use any of the groups as an example, you do have to have some items in your groups here in order for this to work. You have to have at least 2 items, and you'll see why in just a moment. But let's just see here, for example, maybe in these minor quizzes, and maybe I've got a slew of those. Maybe I've got a ton of them in this class that students are taking on the weekly, or whatever. And let's just say I told my students that I would drop their lowest score for their quizzes, right? So in this group, I can choose to drop the lowest score. And how you do that is, whether you're weighing or not, you can do this. In the whatever group, and you can do it more than one group. I'm just going to use one group here as an example. So I'm going to go in minor quizzes. And if you go to these 3 dots way over here on the right-hand side and click on it and simply go to edit, here you can see the name of our group that we gave it. If you did weigh your grades, you'll see the percentage points there. But then notice this: number of scores to ignore for each student. And you'll see that you have a lowest score, and for some weird reason, you also have a highest score. Okay. So here, and you can drop obviously more than one, but let's just say I told my students, and it's on the syllabus, by the way, that I'm going to drop their lowest quiz score. So here I can go and put a number 1, and that would drop, it would ignore the lowest score for each student. Now, this will be a movable feast through the semester, okay? As the students take quizzes one after the other each week or whatever, it's going to change positions. If they make a really bad grade on the 3rd quiz, that's the one that'll be dropped. But if they come back on the 4th quiz and do even worse, that's the one that'll be dropped. So it will fluctuate over the course of the semester. And you can choose more than one if you want to. And this usually happens when a student forgets something or doesn't do it or doesn't do well, and they come to you in a panic saying, oh my gosh, whatever. And you look at them and you're like, look, I'm going to drop your lowest score. Don't let it happen again. Do better next time, and so on. But you've got your get out of jail free card or whatever. Okay. Now, for some reason, we also include dropping the highest score. And I have worked with Canvas now for seven years. I've used Canvas for 7 years, worked with an instructor for 2. And for the life of me, I don't know why this is here. I don't know what kind of sadistic maniac would drop the student's highest score, but I'm sure, it was important enough to be requested as an option and for Canvas to develop it. But you could. I've had people tell me, well, for statistical reasons, you might want to, whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm not going to be the guy that drops the student's highest. Do as good as you can, students. I'm going to drop your highest score. No, not me. But you can if you want to. It's there, okay? Just make sure it's on your syllabus, and then don't let them find out where you live. The other thing is that you can choose to never drop an assignment. So if you have a SLO driven assignment or an assignment, a signature assignment for your in your classes that come heck or high water, it's going to be counted. Then you could also choose of these. No, I'm going to drop the 7 lowest scores, just the 1. Went up crazy. I can add an assignment. Let's just say of these minor quizzes, let's say the vocabulary lesson number 10 is going to be the one that will never drop. And you can add more if you want to. Okay, so I'm just using one of the quizzes as an example. So even if the student does the worst on lesson 10, it will be counted. What Canvas will do then is it will drop the next lowest score. All right, but it will keep this lowest score here because we said to never drop it. So that's how you can apply some rules. You'll see that you have rules now. Drop the lowest score, but never drop vocabulary less than 10. And like I said, you can do this with the discussions. You could go out and do the same thing. However benevolent, boon you want to give your students, you can do that for each of the categories that you create. All right. And that's another good reason for grouping, is that you can, out of that group, then choose to ignore a low score from that group, but not affect the other groups. The next thing I want to show you, still in the assignments menu here, is something that I think you're going to like. You all know that when you move your content from one semester to the next, one of the most unfun things you can do is have to go into every single assignment and change all the due dates. right? So here you can see for every assignment that I have a due date established here for them. And if I move this over from my spring semester to my summer or my fall, guess what comes with them? All the due dates, which means that if I need to update these assignments, I have to go into each and every one of them, go to edit, drop down here to the due date, and change the due date to the next semester's due date or whatever, right? And then I have to do the next one and the next one and the next one, and all of them together. You used to have to do that for a while, but Canvas actually came up with a neat little trick that will help you, I think. Again, in your assignments menu, if you go back up to these three dots up here, you'll notice that the first option you have is called Edit Assignment Dates. So when your content is moved from one semester to the next, you can go to the next assignment dates, and right here for every assignment, you can go in and change those dates in one fell swoop. All right. Even the availability dates of when these assignments will be available and from. Remember, you can create a window of time to give students a certain period of time to complete that particular assignment, and you can just go in and start doing that. But wait, there's more. If I go up here to the top left-hand side and I click title, notice that it highlights all of my assignments. I can come up here and go to what's called batch edit. And I can move or shift these assignments by a certain number of days, okay, which won't be perfect, but it'll put them in the ballpark, okay? Or I can just remove the dates altogether and availability dates and due dates. I'm not actually going to do that. And it will just make it all blank. Then I can go in and just establish my due dates based on my syllabus and course outline as far as when things will be due in this course. So instead of having to go into each and every assignment, again, by clicking on those three dots in the assignments menu and going to edit assignment dates, I can go in and make those changes as I want to for those assignments. All right. Let's go back to the assignments index. And let's talk about creating assignments. Now, as I mentioned, all of the items here have a corresponding column in the grade book. And if they're unpublished, then they're not, again, if they're not published, which means they are not visible to students, they will show up in your grade book as unpublished, but you can hide them and just see only the published items or whatever. If you can see here as well, I can tell if something has already been graded. Our students have already submitted things. If I look and I see that little publish sign, if it's a little lighter, that shows me that there's been activity, that students have submitted things or whatever in that assignment. Okay. But if I want to create an assignment for my students, I can do that right up here in the upper right-hand side. So if you will, go up here to the upper right-hand side and let's create an assignment and talk about some of the different types of assignments we can use in Canvas. Just for the sake of it, I'm going to make a writing assignment, something that the student submits or whatever, all right? But I'm going to show you some various options that you have. Because one of the things that you need to know is if I need to make an extra column in my grade book, I don't go to my grade book and create an extra column for something. You do that by adding an assignment, but we're going to talk about the different types of assignments. So here, I clicked on plus assignment. I'm going to give my assignment a name. Maybe this is my Unit 5 writing assignment. In this box here, remember you have this wonderful rich content editor, and this is where you can apply some instructions and things like that. Typically speaking, at Instructure, one of the things that we like to point out here particularly is this is a really good spot to really answer the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And again, in the idea of making your life easier, the more concise and clear you can make your instructions, the fewer questions you're going to have, all right? We always say that, while you're building an assignment, to include 3 basic bits of information. One is an overview of the assignment, which is kind of like just kind of a brief description of what the assignment is about. I call this answering the whys, right? Because, you know, you have a student, why are we doing this assignment? As I've learned as a father, as a son, you know, as an employee, as a supervisor, as a husband, you know, or whatever. I've learned that, you know, sometimes understanding the whys and explaining the whys is just, you know, part of what makes it a little bit better. So a brief description, you know, maybe in unit 4 we talked about, you know, this right here or whatever. And so I want you to, you know, write us a paper about it or whatever. So you can kind of use that as a means of providing a little bit of a synopsis of why we're doing this assignment. The next thing is basically the instructions, right? So the instructions or guidelines. And this is where you answer the specific, right? Because what happens when you assign your students work? How long does it need to be? You know, how many pages? You know, what format? What else do they ask about? You know, scholarly references, no Wikipedia, whatever. Okay. And so this is where I basically tell my students sort of the, you know, how long, how high, how far, you know, this needs to be. And you got to be kind of specific, you know, as far as what the minimum needs to be versus what the maximum and so on, double spaced and all that. And then finally, any resources or support. And this is where you can include, you know, helpful websites, like Purdue's online writing lab, right? Purdue University's online writing lab. This is where you could also have, you know, links to how-tos, tutorials, etc. Maybe support if they get into if they have a technical issue. Anyway, doesn't have to be very long, just a little something that kind of does that. The nice thing about an assignment is once you build it, you can duplicate the assignment over and over and over again. So if I have unit 1 writing assignment, I can duplicate it and make unit 2, duplicate it and make unit 3, and have most of the same information in these instructions. Now, in order to make it sort of ADA or compatible here, if you do have any headers or students who use screen readers, or maybe for whatever reason you want to just kind of chunk this information a little bit, you can also, by using your formatting tools up here, so like overview, instead of paragraph text, I can make it a heading. Same thing with instructions and guidelines. I can go up here, highlight that, and make it a heading, and do the same thing with my resources and support. So notice that it kind of creates these little natural, smaller McReads instead of a two-page paragraph of instructions of what the student needs to do. In addition, Canvas also provides a way to insert horizontal lines, and you can use those effectively too to kind of create a little separation here. You see, creates a little bit of its own little section there, almost like a newspaper. Okay. And you can even, this is going to change your lives, you can even add some visual cues if you want to, right? So you may have students whose English isn't their first language. Maybe you have some low reader students as well, depending on, okay? You can even add some little visual cues and kind of keep them consistent. You can do that by adding emojis. Now, I know some of you might think, well, that's a little childish or whatever. Emojis can be effective as visual cues, is what I'm saying, particularly for non-English speakers or for students who are struggling to read, that kind of thing. And so to create emojis, to access your emoji keyboard, if you're on a PC, you simply need to go to your Windows key. Find your Windows key. It's down there next to your space bar, has the Windows logo. So it's going to be your Windows key plus a period. Windows plus period. Okay. If you are on a Mac, then you're going to use Control, Command, and Spacebar. So Control plus Command plus Spacebar. Now, put that in the chat so you guys can see instructions of how to access emojis, and your life is now forever changed because you can now sprinkle emojis anywhere in your course. Okay, so let's say for overview, I'm on a Mac, so I'm going to hold my Control, Command, and Spacebar down. Oops, I got to be over here. It's going to bring up my emoji keyboard, and I can start choosing what emoji I want. Let's just say for my overview, it's going to be this apple or something, and it's going to add that little apple there. Oh, yes, TSS for math, use them a lot. Absolutely. And then maybe for my instructions, maybe it's going to be this little spyglass or whatever. And then for my resources and support, maybe that little life vest or lifesaver. Okay. And so by doing that, you can add some nice little visual cues. And the cool thing is, as I mentioned earlier, if I save this, I can duplicate this one assignment over and over and over again, and it will retain all of this stuff. I may have to go in and change the instructions a little bit or why we're doing the assignment, but I can still keep the same sort of motif or template here. Okay. Once you've done that, you can go down and choose the point value that you want to use. Okay. Notice that you also can choose the group it belongs to. So if you've built assignment groups like we just did, then I can choose where to put this. So I can click here and notice there's my writing assignments. So I'm going to house this item right there, and it's going to be weighed alongside all of the other writing assignments at 25% or however much they were. I can't remember. Okay. Notice that you can choose to score points or percentages here. Or incomplete or complete or letter grade or anything else that you want to. You can even include non-graded if you want to. You can also choose to not make it count toward the final grade if you want to on this. If I did that, I might want to go ahead and move it into the non-graded items group as well, just for good measure, so it won't be graded. But this is going to be graded, and I'm going to put it with the writing assignments, okay? Now, the submission type is where the magic happens, okay? So this is where you get to decide what type of assignment it's going to be. Outside of a quiz and discussion, you make those separately. But here, for example, you'll notice that you have 4 basic submission types. The first one is called no submission. So what does no submission mean? No submission simply puts a column in your gradebook, and you can use it for whatever you want. Think about things that they do outside of Canvas. Some of you may be grading students for nursing. You may be grading them on practicums, and they're not doing something inside of Canvas, submitting something, but you're watching them, okay? And you're giving them a score, but you need a column to do that. So you can create that column of no submission, and then it gives you the ability to grade them for whatever they're doing. Maybe if you're teaching music, maybe they have music comps that they have to do throughout the semester, and you need to grade them, or a performance or a speech or something they're giving in class. These are the things that you would choose for no submission. You can still attach a rubric to them and grade them that way, but it gives you an ability to grade them on something that they're doing outside of Canvas, I guess. You'll also see another option is called on paper. And on paper is very much the same thing. It just implies that the student is doing it on paper, like a paper test or a paper that they're typing up on an Underwood typewriter and handing it in like I had to do in college, okay? With the E that's set a little bit higher than every other letter on my page. That's another story. We were poor. But at any rate, you can choose that kind of option as well. Again, it creates a column in your gradebook. So when I was mentioning earlier that you don't create new columns by going to your gradebook, you do that instead by creating an assignment, okay? Oh, no submission or on paper to create those extra columns. If you had one for participation, it would be a no submission, and you could go in and put whatever grade you wanted to there and weigh it according to whatever it is you've associated it with. Okay. The other option is online, but before we do that, there's also external tools. So external tool is really good if you are using, like, for example, if you do have third-party type assignments, like something that's coming in from Elsevier or Pearson or McGraw-Hill, those kinds of things also, you'll find that those are considered external tools. But online is probably where, if I had a written assignment, this is where I would want students to submit something to me online. But even that, notice that you have several options. So instead of a written assignment, like an essay or something like that, maybe it was just 5 questions I wanted to ask my students. I might use something like text entry, which just gives them a text box to answer those questions, right? So instead of giving them a whole thing to turn in that way. For website URL, this might be a website or something you want them to go and find and enter the website address for you on the assignment. I do want you to notice that you can give your students choices by selecting more than one, although typically you probably wouldn't select all of them at once. You would probably, for example, for a 5-question, maybe I gave them 5 questions to answer up here. I'll give them the option of text entry and or file uploads. Okay, so they have to choose which one they're going to do, but they have those options. Media recordings. This gives the student the ability to record their answers. So maybe you have a student, if you ask them 5 questions or something like that, it gives them the ability to upload or create a media recording where they answer it. Maybe they can't use a keyboard for whatever reason and need to be able to record their answers orally. You can use it for something like that. There is a feature called student annotations. This is where you can upload a file and have the students annotate it. And that sounds like a really cool feature, and it is. However, it is a little clunky, I will say. I have found that the annotation feature, unless you have really specific instructions, it's kind of difficult. I mean, I've submitted things many times and it didn't capture my responses because I forgot to hit the check mark after I annotated it. And I can imagine students doing the same thing. So typically when I talk about do Canvas training on assignments, I typically say it's a cool idea. You might try it on a small scale, but be prepared for confusion, okay, for some of these. And remember, we're here to make your life easier. So this was a newer feature that came along that they're still sort of developing and hashing out. So just know it's still very experimental, I guess. For a handout, I'm going to choose for students for a written assignment like I have here. I'm going to choose that students upload a file to me. Now notice also you have the ability to restrict file types, which means that you can only put in the allowed file extensions, which means that if I told my students that they have to submit something to me in Microsoft Word, then I could put doc and docx here or whatever, and it will only accept the file extensions that I put here. Okay. Now, some of us are a little older and remember the great shift in Microsoft from Office 97 to, or excuse me, what was it? It was Office, Office 95, I believe it was, to Office 97 to 2003. And then the great shift from Office 97 to 2003 to Office XP or whatever it was next. I can't remember. But at any rate, I do remember it wasn't compatible with each other. If you had I had an older version and my students were using a newer version, they would submit something to me and it didn't work. I also remember students submitting things in Apple Pages or Google Docs or ODT, which was Open Office, and all these different file types that were running around out there. The good news is if a student is using Google, they can download it as a Word document. However, typically, just for my money, I do not check this. And the reason I don't is if I told the students that I wanted it in Microsoft Word, I expect to receive it in Microsoft Word. However, if they do upload something there, then we're going to have a teachable moment on our hands, okay, and give them an opportunity to do that. The last thing I want is, is to have a grade challenge or something where it's all I tried to submit something and it wouldn't work, whatever, and have that back and forth, okay. Give them the opportunity to upload something, but then also make it very clear that If I can't open it, I can't grade it, at the end of the day or whatever. And then give them maybe an opportunity to correct it. But that's completely up to you. It's an instructor-student issue. Okay, but it is there. Speaking of which, you can also choose to allow multiple attempts if you want to. Under the number of attempts here, notice that you can choose unlimited or limited. And here, normally I would give like 2 attempts. If they did mess up the first one, I'll give them a little saying, I can't open this. It's not the format that I asked for. Go figure it out and re-upload it. Okay. And give them another opportunity. If there are students that have technical issues and things like that, then you might consider at least offering 2 attempts for them to upload it. What will happen is Canvas will have both attempts. In the grade book and in the speed grader, you'll only see the most recent attempt, but you can go back to the previous one if you want to. Now, are you guys using, are y'all using like a third-party checker for plagiarism? Okay. Blackboard had SafeAssign.
We do have SafeAssign, but we don't have anything for AI.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that's a whole new world, isn't it? Man, I tell you, maybe I got out of higher education at the right time before all that exploded. Oh my goodness, we were having enough time with plagiarism. Oh my gosh, but just in general, which is just a common problem, I think. But yeah, so if you and Canvas now has sort of a detection tool that they're experimenting with right now. So again, Canvas is an ever-growing tool. So if we don't have it yet, we probably will. And so be prepared for that. When we moved to Canvas, we did not have Blackboard came bundled with SafeAssign, and we had to go find a third-party tool. And I used several. I used VeriCite, Unicheck. All of them were summarily bought by Turnitin. I was avoiding Turnitin because we couldn't afford it. Okay, so I was going the cheaper route. I went to VeriCite first, and my English faculty came at me and were like, "We hate this. We got to find something else." I said, "Okay, well, let's sit down and figure out what we can do next." And so we went to Unicheck, which was fine. And then Unicheck was purchased by Turnitin. We ended up biting the bullet and buying Turnitin. But even so, there are things that the plagiarism detection tools, AI, things like that's making it harder and harder to do that. At the time, there was a feature called Spinbot. Anybody ever heard of Spinbot? Spinbot.com is a website, and all it does is it paraphrases words. So a student can take something written by someone else, and they can go out to Spinbot, plug it in, and it will spit out a paraphrased moving sentences and word around that will fool all of the plagiarism detection tools, including Turnitin. Where you catch them is where they do not do their diligence and check their work. So, for example, I had a government student that was writing about the U.S. Superior Court and not the Supreme Court. Okay, and so it was like, well, there was a question throughout the document. But my absolute favorite was I had a student whose last name was High, H-I-G-H. And when he submitted his work, it came back as like George Altitude. It was like, should we, yeah, and it was so funny because when you sit down with these students, they just immediately cop to it. They're like, oh yeah, you got me or whatever. But it's really interesting. So at any rate, but you can limit the number of attempts that they have. We won't be able to get into it today, but you can create group assignments. So there is an opportunity in Canvas, a real easy way to create groups in your people menu and then assign group assignments to different groups and have them turn it in. The neat thing about that is that one person can turn it in on behalf of the rest of the group and be able to submit that. And then you grade it one time and it grades everybody in that group, which is really kind of neat. Peer reviews is another thing you can also do in Canvas. So if you want to assign peer reviews, you do have to use a rubric with your assignments. But if you have a peer review, you can manually assign students to review each other's work. You can also choose to automatically assign 2 peer reviews per user per student, and they have to go out and look at 2 of them, and you can have a due date for the assignments there and then have them appear anonymously so they don't know who was looking at their paper, that kind of thing. So there's just a way of kind of creating some really neat collaborative experiences in there with students. And then, of course, I don't think you guys have anonymous grading, but there is a feature for anonymous grading as well. Then you can add your due date. Remember, you can always add your due date to everyone in the class, or you can also include exceptions for some students if you need to give them an exception for a few extra days to turn in their work, much like we talked about with quizzes on Friday. So with that, I'm going to choose the due date here. And in the due date, maybe I'll just give it till the end of the month here. Remember, if you do not put a specific time, AM or PM down here, it will just default to the end of the day. All right. And then if I wanted to, I could also choose a window in which student would have access to submit the assignment. The student would still be able to see the assignment in the grade book and all of that. However, they wouldn't actually be able to access it to submit it until the date that I choose here if I want to. I can also choose an until date, generally the due date, same time, where the student would then no longer be able to submit something to that assignment after the past there, or after the end date. I typically leave this open because when we talk about the grade book here in a minute, we're going to be talking about late policies. You actually have some late policies you can put in there. So if you leave the until date open, the student would still be able to submit after the due date. And you're thinking, well, that's bad. But it will appear as late in the grade book. And from there, you at least give the student the ability to submit something, even if it's for a lower score or a penalty. You can do that, and you can apply the late policies in the gradebook, or you can just do it on your own, however you choose to do that. And as we mentioned before, you can add exceptions for students. So if Hope here, needs a little extra time to complete the assignment, or whomever, I can come down and give Hope a separate due date, maybe March the 4th or something at the end of the day. And then now everyone else in the class is due on the 29th. And Hope will be due on the 4th. Okay. So that's just an option that you have. Neither one will know that the other has a due date differently, unless, of course, it's in the syllabus. But the rest of the class wouldn't know that Hope got an exception by design. Once you've completed your assignment, you're going to come down here and hit save and publish. Once you have the assignment built, oops, you see I have an incorrect spelling of unit. I can come up here and edit that real quick, and then I can take that 9 out of there. There we go. And I'm going to hit save. All right. There we go. Now there's the assignment. Now, one of the things that you can also add is a rubric. So when you create an assignment, you can also add a rubric here. Now, in our next session, we're going to be really spending some time talking about rubrics. All right. So rubrics really are kind of neat because if you have rubrics that are established for your institution, so you can have rubrics that are already available at the WSU Tech level. You can also have them available for different departments. So let's say I'm in the math department and we're using certain rubrics for math. We could actually have it in there and be all of us using the same rubrics. We can also have it at the individual course level. Now, having at the course level doesn't give me the ability to share it well with other people, only just in my own courses or whatever, but I can create my own personal rubrics if I want to. The neat thing about rubrics is if they're real easy to create if you don't have any yet. So you can go out and add the criteria for a rubric and then add your ratings over here and then add additional criteria for that. If you have a rubric already available, you can go out and find rubrics. So if I have a rubric here let me just find one maybe that I have that looks okay. I've got my written response rubric here. I can go out and use this rubric and it'll pull that up. The other thing is that you can plug in outcomes. And we're going to be talking about outcomes in our next session when we talk about outcomes and rubrics. But you have the ability to go out and find outcomes. Now, remember, outcomes at WSU, you have your student learning outcomes and you have your program learning outcomes, your SLOs and PLOs. Those have all been established already at your account. So if, for example, if I wanted to add a criteria or find an outcome to add to this rubric, I can go out here to find outcome, and then I can go down and find, if I have some oral and written communication, maybe, yeah, there we go. I've got an oral and written communication outcome here. The student can articulate thoughts, ideas, or whatever that's already in my system, and I can import that here to my rubric. And we're going to be spending some time building rubrics together next time. So we're going to be looking at program level outcomes and student learning outcomes and how we can add those. The nice thing is those outcomes, I understand you guys have a visit coming up very, very soon. This week, is it? Oh, yeah. Okay. Is that hopefully what we're hoping is that with the use of plugging in outcomes and rubrics and in quizzes and things like that, you're going to be able to have an easier time getting institutional effectiveness and program review data that will then help you. If those of you who are department chairs or responsible for helping with the program reviews or whatever, you'll have an easier time of being able to collect outcome data. Okay. And I don't know what it's like for your commission, but for the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, they get the most dings out of that particular area of being able to have data and outcome data. And so that's a really big deal for accreditation, but also just seeing if students have mastered certain outcomes. So anyway, you can do that as well. In addition to adding outcomes and criteria to a rubric, you can choose to remove the points and just use it as a grading tool and then apply your own grade. You can, if you want to use it as part of the grading, you can. Okay. So you can use it as part of the assignment grading. So all the point values up here will then be assessed part of the student's grade. You will be able to go in and add your own grading mechanism outside of the rubric as well. I'm a really big fan of rubrics in the sense that it does show the student exactly what I'm going to be looking for before the student attempts the assignment. So the student was going to be able to see this rubric here, and this is a little bit wild. It's probably a bigger rubric than I would normally use, but they would be able to see that what they're going to be, what I'm going to be looking at as I grade their paper. Okay. So I'm a big fan of rubrics. In other words, so once you have the assignment created and your rubric attached, if you would like to use a rubric, now I need to make it visible to my students. Now notice that my assignments, I saw Christy put this in here earlier as well. And that is my assignments menu is hidden from my students by design. I don't want them out there just playing around looking at my assignments menu. So instead, I'm going to make this assignment visible to students through the modules. So if I go to my modules here, collapse this one a little bit. And let's just say I'm going to add the assignment here to my Unit 1 module, for lack of better terms. Remember, I can go over here to the right-hand side of the module, and I can add assignments to the module. So I'm going to choose assignments here, and I'm going to find that Unit 5 writing assignment, and I'm going to drop it right here in the module. I can move it up if I want my students to be able to see it a little bit easier. I can also increase the indent to kind of keep it lined up with everything else. Notice how I use some emojis on my modules as well. And those look good on a mobile device for students who are using their mobile device. So now that I've got my assignment out there, a student can go out. I'm going to go into student view here. A student can go out and find that module or that assignment. And they will see the instructions. They'll see how many attempts that they have. They'll have a due date right up here. They'll see how many points it's worth. Notice that they have the immersive reader, so they can actually have the screen read to them, which is another good reason why we used headings and things like that to kind of help separate the text there. They can also see the rubric that I'm going to be using here. And then down here is where they can upload their files. Now, I know you guys don't have Studio, so kindly ignore that. But notice that you have a file upload here. If you're using Microsoft Office, students could actually go out and choose something from their Office OneDrive and upload it there if they wanted to. Okay. Y'all are Office, right? Am I correct? Yeah. And then down here, notice that I can simply choose a file upload. So I'm going to go out as a student. I'm going to find the file that I wish to upload here. Now, it's going to upload, and then it's going to ask me to submit the assignment, which I'm going to do. Now, in Canvas, whenever you submit an assignment on time, it's going to give the student a little celebratory confetti. All right, you did it. Good job. All right. Now, the student can see also the assignment that they've uploaded. This is key if you've ever had a student that turned in the wrong thing. No, well, I thought I was turning in the right thing or whatever. You can actually say, well, you can see this on your side. I'm the student right now, and I can see exactly what I'm submitting to my professor. Okay? Now, once that's done for the professor's side, the professor is going to be able to go out to the grade book now and find that written assignment somewhere. It's probably going to be at the end. Yep, all the way at the end, of course. One thing you can do in Canvas that you couldn't do in Blackboard is you can just pick your columns up and move them around if you want to, which I find helpful. Okay, there we go. All right, so there's my Unit 5 writing assignment. Notice that I can see that the student has submitted something here. All right. Now, what's really cool is that we have a tool called the Speed Grader, and this is going to allow me to go in and review. Now, you've had annotation tools in Blackboard as well, but there's a few things that I hope that you'll like about the Speed Grader, and that is if you simply go up here to the top, you can choose the 3 dots and choose Speed Grader. It will take you to the Speed Grader, or you can click where the student submitted something and then choose that little door, and you can see that you can go to the Speed Grader that way too. So if I go to the Speed Grader, it's going to show me the student's work. You'll notice that there's student's work there. You're going to notice at the top of the screen that I have a drop down, and I've also have some left and right arrows. This will allow me to toggle between students. So if I want to go from this student to another student, I can click that down arrow. I can see who all have submitted something by the little dot there. All of these are all blank, as you can see, so they haven't turned anything else in, but I can also toggle using my arrows back and forth. All right. You can also see when it was submitted. You can see when the student last viewed it, which is another key thing. You can see how many words, and you can also see the submitted file. Here you also have an area where you can put a grade, but notice that you can also use the rubric. So if I choose View Rubric and I move this over a little bit, yes, absolutely. You can see more than 10. Notice that I can come down here through the rubric and start adding my grades and comments, so I can start choosing as I read the paper where they fell in this rubric, and I can also add my own comments here. I can grade using the rubric here, and so on. Okay. Again, I don't have to grade. I don't have to use the grade here as part of that. This could be, non-graded. I can still come up here and put whatever grade I want for this assignment. So I can be just as capricious and arbitrary as I wanted to. Okay. If the student did submit more than one time, as was mentioned here, I would be able to let's look at the latest attempt, but I can also see a previous attempt here as well. There's like a little drop down. I can view that previous attempt. Notice that you also have the ability, we'll talk more about that in a minute. You have the ability to annotate this paper here. So here you can drop down comments, that little teardrop up here allows you to drop in comments. You can choose the color that you want and then just drop in a comment here. You can use a highlighter tool and choose the color of highlighter. Okay, and you can highlight a passage there, and you can also comment there if you want to. You can add some free-form text, which just lets you drop in some text anywhere on the screen. You can choose a smaller font or whatever. Whoops, let me choose that area. Good work, whatever. And then once it's there, I can also drag this around anywhere I want. Okay. You can strike through text. Came down here. And you can strike through and leave a comment. You have the ubiquitous pen. Okay. This little pen here, you can choose the color. You can choose the size of the nib. And then you can come down here and draw your comments there and add your comments as you draw around things as well. Okay. You can add your comment, whatever you want. You can also draw a box around a passage or whatever you want there too. And of course, leave a comment. So you have these annotation tools that you can download the annotated version right up here if you want to, or just leave it there. Students will be able to see the annotations, including also how you marked them up on the rubric. But notice that you also have the ability to add some free-form general comments right over here. So this is where you can start typing in your comments and all of that. The cool thing is, notice that you can also use speech to text, clicking on this little microphone here, and you can start recording. Overall, I think you did a great job on this assignment. However, you need to be more conscientious about grammar and spelling. And you can add that as part of your dictation there. You can also record a media comment. Remember, the media comment allows you to go in and add a little something to the students, add a little presence, if you will, to kind of give the students some encouragement. They can see your face, they can hear your voice, that kind of thing. You can also attach files. If you want to attach some information, you can attach it here. But my favoritist piece here is this little feature right here. This kind of flies under the radar if you don't know what it is. This is your comment library. So folks, how many of you feel like a broken record every time you go out to grade student work? You're saying the same thing over and over and over again. Wouldn't it be great if you could record a comment library or keep phrases and comments in a place that you can go in and recycle later? So you can see I have 3 comments here. So let's just say I'm grading this student's work. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to be saying this again. I'm going to add it to my library. So you can add it to your library. You can see I have 3 comments over here. Overall, your essay includes some excellent points. However, be sure to follow APA formatting guidelines and see Purdue University's online writing labs at al.purdue.edu. Or great first effort, pay closer attention to your spelling and grammar. Might be helpful to reach out to the campus writing tutorial lab or whatever. So I can choose that if I wanted to and say, okay, you know what? Instead of retyping this, I want to use that. Once I have it in my comments, then I can tailor it a little bit to that student's needs or whatever, but I don't have to retype that whole thing over and over and over again. Is that cool or what? Okay. That's usually a crowd pleaser, so you know, I'm not hearing any yippies or whoops this time, but there we go. Round of applause. There we go. There we go, Linda. I can always tell Linda. There we are. Yeah, and so here's the other cool thing too. If I leave this class and I go to another class, or maybe I go to another class next semester and I go out to the speed grader, your comment library follows you. So it goes wherever you go. All right. So this comment library that I have here, I'm going to be able to use it wherever I go. Like I said, if I go to another, if I'm teaching another type of class and I go to the comment library there, these same comments will be there. Next semester, when I teach another class with a whole other group of students, when I go to the speed grader, these same comments will be there, whatever I add there. Okay. Can the students leave comments? Yes, they can. So they have the ability to add comments as well. You'll be able to see those too. Okay. So once you're happy with your comments and everything else, you can come up here. Everybody in my class makes an 85, so that's what they get. And and I can come down and hit submit, and it's going to grade that paper for the student with my comments and everything else. Now, I'm going to go back to the grade book, and we're going to kind of finish up with a little quick look at our grade book. So yeah, that's easy. How you go to the how you can look and see what students have turned in by seeing the little symbol down there. Let me find my unit writing assignments, or are they? They're over here. Okay. And now you can see the student made an 85 on there as well. One of the things too, so in the gradebook, you have a few little features as well, which I think are really cool. You notice I've excused several assignments here. If you have a student here, maybe Loki Odinson here, maybe for whatever reason, could not complete this assignment. Maybe he had a good reason why he couldn't complete the assignment. Instead of giving him a 0 or whatever, I could simply excuse it. And the way you excuse an assignment is just to write in the letters EX, and it automatically excuses it. No harm, no foul. It's as it's never happened for that student. Okay. In addition to the moving things around in the gradebook, you do have the ability up here to search either assignments or students. So if you have a ton of students and a ton of assignments, you can go up here and start just looking up students. So if I want to look at just one student or two, maybe I've got a couple of students in here that are, maybe I'm watching them. Maybe they've got a few assignments that are just too close together. Just by typing their name in the search names, I can sort of do a side-by-side comparison. All right. Sometimes I have to kind of look at that. If their grades are awful similar and what they've turned in, I can do that as well. I can also just look at specific assignments by just typing in the assignment name here. I also have several filters that I can apply. So if I want to look at just specific modules or sections or assignment groups, I can choose just a certain assignment groups and focus on those one at a time. And you can also look at start and end dates for assignments and also submissions, only those who have submitted. In the student name area of the gradebook, there's a couple of things here. You'll notice that I have the name of the student, but I also have some secondary info. So if I click in the student name, the 3 dots up here, you'll notice that you can choose secondary infos if you want to see their login name or their student number or student ID number or SSID here. You can choose that and it will show you that information there. If you click on an individual student, you're also going to see their name. You can message them here. You can sort of see what they've done on the last few assignments. You can even look at their grades independently here. So you can go up here and look at the grades and see just how they're doing. And you can print their grades if you want to. You can see how it's being weighted. You can also, if you click on their name here or whatever, what they turned in, you can see this with a discussion, and I can see what the students mentioned here on that discussion. These are all fake students, by the way. One of my favorite features is, remember, Canvas has these notification tools. Oh, Rob has a question. Go ahead, Rob. Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thanks. You're probably not going to know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Such little confidence, Rob.
Well,
You're probably right, though.
I didn't, and I've been in this business a long time. So one of the things that, and I know we're not here to talk about Blackboard, but one of the questions that has come up at least once, several times actually, is in the legacy system that we have in the gradebook. Blackboard supported a feature which allowed for the faculty to be able to custom color not just the 5 options, but they could actually apply custom criteria to gradebook items. Like they could say, below 30% flag that as bright red, and 40 to 50% flag that as yellow, whatever. And they really dug this feature. This was really cool. And besides the 5 options you have, or whatever it is, 6 options, I don't know about custom criteria or field. What has this question ever come up with your clients?
Really, it hasn't. It hasn't a lot, but that's thanks, Josephine. It hasn't come up actually for that. You can custom color various items, but you can't. You can custom color them, of course, but you can't set your own criteria that way, unfortunately. Now, you can message students who meet certain criteria. You may be familiar with this feature as well. So for example, in this class here, in the gradebook title or in the grade title here, you notice that I've got some variations of grades here. I've got some in the 60s, some in the 80s, some in the 90s, and so on. If I click on the three dots up here, I can message students who, and you'll find this in every gradebook column. So while I'm here for Unit 1, maybe I want to message them real quick, and I can message those students who haven't submitted yet, and I can see who they are, and I can send them a BCC message that each student doesn't know if they haven't submitted. Maybe we're getting close to the deadline, and I can say, hey, you know, we're about to approach the deadline. You guys that haven't turned in anything need to go ahead and get it turned in. I can also send out a message for anyone who hasn't been graded yet. So for any of these students who haven't received a grade, I can also message them as well. I can also message students if they scored more than, say, an 80. And I have 5 students who received a grade higher than an 80, and I can send them a nice little good job, that kind of thing, or whatever. Christy mentions that the Mastery Gradebook has colors based on outcomes. That's true. We are going to talk about outcome, how that works as far as how they measure against outcomes. But no, there's no customized way of just kind of setting it up to where you separate students by score, I don't think, at least as far as I know. Now, I know that I can come here in these grades as well, and I can sort the grades by, I can sort by their grades, low to high, high to low, or missing or excused or whatever. So if I want to look at the, you know, high to low grades, I can sort my grades that way. But yeah, unfortunately, there's not really a custom color coding, if that makes any sense, at least that I'm aware of in Canvas. Good question, though. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So yeah, notice that you can message the students for what they did. And then remember, when you send that message, it does blind copy those students so they don't know it was sent to other students as well. You can export your gradebook as a CSV or an Excel spreadsheet, basically, here. If you don't change the columns and things like that, you can enter grades and then re-import them if you want to that way. If you want to enter a grade for a student, you can just simply go out there and enter a grade or whatever for each of the students for those types of items that are going to be manually graded, maybe that performance or that speech that they gave to class or whatever. You can choose that as well. Remember, when you're grading them, you can also, if they do have a rubric assigned in the speed grader, so maybe this was a speech they were giving in the class, even though they haven't submitted anything, I can use the rubric as a scoring mechanism for as well. Okay. The other thing is, finally, is that you can also pause notification. So every time you enter a grade for a student, they're going to get immediate notification through their email. So just know that. If, for example, you want to kind of grade in peace, so you want to be able to enter all the grades and not have them beating your door down. Why did I make this? Or and to have them be notified all at once. You can actually go out to the column heading here, and you can do what's called your grade posting policy. Grade posting policy allows you to manually post the grades. So grades will be automatically hidden by default. And then when you're already have all your grades entered and everything else, then you can come back and make it automatic. And then it will notify the students that that all at one time that their grades are in there. This is really helpful for you if you, want to kind of have a little bit of private or peace or whatever and have everyone be notified at once. Because you guys know how it works. You grade a couple of students' paper. They come to you, well, how come I made this and my classmate over here, made that or whatever. You can just kind of address that all at one time by just going to the grade posting policy, changing it to manual, and it will pause all notifications and not send them anything. Okay. And then you can come back and you'll see that whenever you make it manual, it will say manual right there. And then you can go back and choose grade posting policies and make it automatic. Like that. Up here at the top, you also have this little gear icon. This little gear icon allows you to establish late policies. So everything is just like with Blackboard, it does keep a running total of things. So if it doesn't have a grade, it's not being calculated. So at the end of the day, all of your items will need to have a grade assigned to them. And if there's any missing submissions toward the end of the semester, you could automatically apply the grade of 0 for any missing submissions, and then it will calculate everything that way. Okay. You can also apply late deductions. So applying a late deduction is you would grade as normal. If you're grading on a 100% scale and that student made a 90, you would give them a 90 or whatever. However, if they turned it in late, say by a day, then it's going to dock them 10% of their score, or however many percentages you want. Typically a letter grade 10% is pretty standard. Notice that you can also change that to hour. So every hour that it's late, you're taking off 10%, or every day. So depending on how you want to apply that, if you want to apply it at all, you could. You could tell your students just straight across the board, you're getting a 20-point deduction for it being late. Turn in something and you'll make a 20 or whatever. The same thing is if you do also apply a percentage deduction for every day or whatever interval you choose, you can also choose a lowest possible grade, or basically a floor, that if they just submit something, they'll get 10 points or whatever. Okay. So that is another option that you have there. Again, you do not have to use the late policy if you don't want to. It is just something that's there. Just like you can have a grade posting policy for individual assignments, you can also apply it to the whole grade book. So you could basically shut off any notifications for the whole grade book, and keep the students, keep everything kind of hidden until you're ready to make it visible to your students. Typically, though, it is done by item, I think, more than it is a grade book. I think that would really cause a lot of questions for your students. Under the advanced area, you have what's called the final grade override. And what this does is it's going to put another column at the end by the total column. It's going to have a column at the very end called override. And what override does, if you have students that are kind of on the bubble, so look at this. This student right here is making an 89.58. That's how his grade is being calculated, or her grade is being calculated. So if I wanted to round that up to a 90, instead of going in and adding fudge points to various things, I could simply come out here to the override column and just say, guess what? You're getting a 90 or whatever, and give them an A. All right. I can round it up, in other words. Same thing here. Maybe I want to just go ahead and give them a D, give them a 60 or whatever. Whatever your grading policies are, you can change it. If you add a numeric, it'll just change it to whatever letter grade it has there. And again, the students will not see both columns. If you gave them that 90, they'll just see the 90. They won't see this 89.58. Okay. If you didn't give them an override, then they normally will just see that grade there. But the purpose of the override is to allow you the flexibility to award some extra points or deduct extra points, however you see fit, in order to be able to round up or round down particularly those students that are kind of on the bubble. And then finally, the other thing you have are what's called the view options. The view options allows you to sort the grade book by assignment name, or by due date, oldest to newest, newest to oldest, by points, if you want to sort it by points. And this just apply to your view, not what your students see. You also can show a few things. So if you wanted to hide those assignment groups, you can hide that. You can also hide the total and override columns as you want to. You can also view anything ungraded as 0 just to see what that looks like for your students. You can also add a notes column. Now, a notes column, I'm going to go down here and submit this. It's going to create a little column here where you can add some notes for your students. For example, I have this student requires additional time on her test, so I've got a little note. It's important to note that only you will see the note column. Your students do not see this. This is just something that you will see. All right. You can see last essay was almost identical to Hope's. Yeah, this person requires extra time. You can just make little notations for each of your students. Maybe there's things that you want to be able to remember and things like that whenever you're grading that you can put here. And again, that notes column is only visible to you, the professor, not the students. All right. That was kind of fast. You can set the status different for any late items or anything that's been dropped or excused. You can choose those items as well for those particular students. And most of the times, like for example, for quizzes, you're going to have automatic grades entered in there that you can go in and fudge if you need to as well. Thank you so much, Linda. I appreciate it. I know everybody's needing to head out, so I want to take us to the end here. And I want to say thank you for joining me today, first of all. Any questions or anything else for the good of the cause? I want you to be sure and grab your assignments badge. You actually earned 2 badges today because you had to listen to me for so long. The first one is you get your assignments badge. If you have a QR code reader, you can grab that there. I also want to share with you the grading and feedback badge. So that way you have 2 badges here for the price of 1. And I just want to say thank you all for joining me today. I did take a couple of notes to get some questions answered for you that you had. So thank you all for the great questions. I told you it's not hard to stump the trainer, so you certainly did today. So thank you very much on that. And I will get back with you with some with a little more details about that plagiarism detection tool. And also I'll provide some specific instructions on extra credit. So thank you all so much again. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon. Bye, everyone.